the best HLTV fantasy player we've had ever. It's Lucy.
You guys didn't believe, but my gamble paid off. The Imperial 5th player offset by my 3 gold players, top 14%. I also thought the top team for the entire event had an Imperial player, so it ended up being a very sound strategy. Looking at the playoffs now, I think a lot of people are going to fall into the trap of a 2-2-1 draft with FaZe and Mongols. Because you look at this playoff bracket, you think, yep, FaZe, farm Saw, this is a dead team walking, FaZe already beat them in groups. That's a guarantee. You feel the same about Mongols and this entire side of the bracket, that they should be the team that gets to the grand final. However, there are stumbling blocks along the way. But notably, we have a 3rd place decider match here, which means that if you have players that get through to the semis and lose that semi, they still play a 3rd place decider. And if they win that, they could actually maybe even do better than players that get to the grand final and then lose it. So I think there is actually some validity to a 2-1-1-1 draft based on that, and playing into some of these, I guess, underdog teams like Mal's, like Falcons, like Eternal Fire, maybe Pain or Astralis, but I would probably maybe step away from those 2 in particular. But I think Mal's is particularly interesting because Pain are quite a weak team, even though Mal's we don't expect to do well here. I think they can win that quarter. And even if they lose that semi, there's a chance they could beat Eternal Fire or Falcons. You know, like, I think there's definitely worlds where these other teams are worth a look at outside of just a player to like get really cheap. I think Chicken Out, for instance, is a really bad strategy here. You should not be getting, you know, Materius or Roman and chickening him out, because we have an 8-team bracket. So if you get your 5th from one of these other matches and they win that match, that's going to be way better than doing the Chicken Out strategy. So I think Chicken Out, not the play here. Try and think a little bit outside of the box. So let's look at some players and see what we can do. Starting with Eternal Fire, I think that Jota and Woxic are the 2 players you look at here. Both played well during the group stage, and I think are the only ones whose price really jumps out, and you only grab 1 player from Eternal Fire if you're grabbing one of those. If you do go heavy into Eternal Fire, obviously Xantares is the player you look at, but I think that's the only reason you would draft him or Madger is if you're going heavy on this team and you pass him with Cardia. Everyone's drafting double FaZe. This is one of the few times where Karrigan actually kind of feels like an okay playoff choice, just because he'll farm against Saw. Rain's been super consistent and I think is a really good player. Brokey, maybe a little bit higher highs. The only player I'd maybe urge against is Liege. Just look towards Frozen. He's cheaper and has been the best player on this team. From the Mongols, again, there's only 1 player I'd maybe urge against, which is Mazzinio, only because Techno has been about as good as him this year. Mazzinio has been a little underperforming so far. Blitz has been the most consistent player on this team forever, and I think is the safest player you can draft on this team. Senzu has the highest highs, and 9-10 is maybe a little bit more consistent in some of the bigger games, but Senzu is the most potential of any player here. So I think Blitz for safety, Senzu for potential, 9-10 if you just go and balls to the wall Mongols. I think Mal's are really interesting. I think the players that jump out to me are Jimfat. 203 feels like maybe the cheapest we've seen from him. And I think the numbers in these players, when you look at them, don't tell the full story. If you filter out Kato when they were playing with Zelek and they got stomped out, they actually kind of look like they're performing as they have been pretty, much in the past, like in terms of the output. Torchi, Zersh, and Jimfat all playing really well. Spinks has slotted in and is playing similar tier to what he was in Vitality. Berlin, I think, is on a 0.9 average as IGL, so his pricing makes sense. But I think Jimfat and Xerxin, there's a case to be made to pick one of them, because again, they should be beating Pain, which means they get to the semis. If they upset, you're feeling great because they're in the grand final. If they lose, 3rd place decider, they can win that. Astralis are not worth drafting. I think they have one of the hardest opening games. You can draft them, but only if you think they beat Mongols. But that seems like an incredible long shot. I'd say Cadian is maybe the only valid choice for Chicken Out for this event, just because if you Chicken Out Cadian, they lose, it's fine. If they win, they actually probably have better matchups in the semis than they do in the quarters. So Cadian could maybe get you some points there. He's been averaging similar to Brolin, but is like almost 20k cheaper. But yeah, this team's incredibly risky. I wouldn't draft them. I think Falcons are really interesting. I think they can beat Eternal Fire. And I think, again, this is a team whose numbers are slightly misleading. If you ignore their first 3 games, which maybe that's too much to ask, but if you filter out the 2 Eternal Fire games and you look at everything post then, Magiska's been on a 1.1 rating. Tessus has been playing really well. Everyone has been performing. Nico is like a 1.3 average. This team, I think, will surprise people. And if you're wanting to go for a 1% draft, I think they could be a team just to maybe dip into. I think Payne's inexperience when it comes to playoffs and inconsistencies makes them really difficult to draft, even though Davideus and QZ are both good pricing. It's very difficult to see this team beating Mal's and then doing anything further. But they're incredibly cheap, particularly Bigazera, who we know can be a real star on this team, just hasn't been, again, consistency, the big issue for this team. And in the playoffs, unknown territory, huge risk. And so we won't even bother talking about them. This team is not beating FaZe. If they do, we're all screwed. So, because this is an 8-team bracket, because this is a third place decider on the line, and because every bloody team is double FaZe, double Mongols, I am going 2-1-1-1 as my draft. My 2 will be FaZe though. I am going to follow the crowd. Gonna go Carrigan and Rain. Rain has been super consistent, less likely to feed now that Elige is hard entering on this team so much. I think Versailles, you can't pass up on this team. I'm then going to grab Senzu from the Mongols. I do want to get a bit of the Mongols pie, but because Techno and Mazzinho are so picked, I want to grab someone that's got a bit more oomph to them. It's going to be Senzu, best performer. Wanted to get him. 2 spots left, and I cannot pass up on Jimmy. 203, Mouse will beat Payne. I think there's a good chance for them to win the third place decider or, even potentially get to the grand finals. And Jimmy for 203 isn't a risky player, so I'm happy with him. 196 remaining, which I could get Techno, but again, I don't want to double Mongols. I want to spread, I want to hedge my bets, and so I'm going to be grabbing Magisk. That's going to be my team. It's a little bit risky, but I've still got some safety nets, and I'm really wanting to see if this sort of strategy works for these PGL brackets with the third place decider, because that's going to be the format they run in the future. So on one hand, I'm kind of just testing the waters for what should work and seeing if my theories work in practice. So let's see, there's a few underdogs in here. I really think that this could pay off. Let me know your thoughts, let me know what you're drafting, and as always, good luck.